This is Dawn here for Soul Simple Life Shifts. I wanted to do a recording today to talk a little bit about our approach to knowledge and information and education, all those good things that are really lovely and important to dive into and really bring us a lot, or those of us who love learning anyway, a lot of joy and reward. So this is not to in any way say that we need to not access information or thirst for knowledge or learn and grow through education, and even in the formal sense of that. But it is to suggest that there are ways that we might consider broadening the ways that we do that and the approach that we take to it. And put my glasses on. So yeah, this is all around our approach to knowledge and information. And this is one of those ones where I'm going to touch on, 5 or 6 different shifts. There's probably not going to be necessarily a soul simple life practice that I'm going to share, because I think that will be evident and will come to you based on what we talk about. I hope the wind is not too bad for the sound, but I'm going to keep going. So let's talk about how we've approached this in the past, and then how we might broaden our perspective, or kind of take a step back and revisit how we are approaching this area of knowledge and information. So often we have been conditioned or taught that there's always a need to go seek external information or validation for our own hunches or internal knowing or intuitive insights. And so it's often been about researching or external sources of information, verifying the facts, all of which are important, and in some contexts, obviously, scientific endeavors that becomes an absolute must, right? That's a part of that process. So I'm not actually approaching it from any one frame, but I'm more like saying, as we move through our lives, what is the stance that we're taking toward knowledge and information? And I think naturally we are making shifts societally, and most of us individually. Although with the advent of AI and that becoming increasingly a go-to, it can be easy to go back to that default, right, of external validation. And that has been true actually since the internet, at least in my experience of somebody who knew the world before there was an internet and before there were immediacy in terms of the cell phone in our hands and other everybody has a computer, or most people have computers or access to that sort of instant gratification in terms of reaching out for knowledge and information. So often, the need for information has driven us, and the shift that we may be invited to make right now is that we, rather than needing information, we could see ourselves and all things as being information, being informed through the experience of life. And also the idea that maybe in some cases we are the information. In other words, we are more a primary, or at very least secondary, source of further knowledge and information, just by our bodies and our minds and our hearts being receptors, if you will. There's also the idea, if we go to how we've done it long term, there's been this endless quest for knowledge, as opposed to a growing awareness that we actually have all we need, either at our fingertips and or just by being who we are and being on the way, that there is access to, naturally, all the information that is needed, primarily because we are in formation. We are always being updated and upgraded, our internal system, operating system. Again, it's not really an either or here, I'm suggesting, but another place is like this idea that we need to absorb information and knowledge, like we need more, There's always that, it's similar to what I just mentioned about the endless quest or thirst. And there's kind of a never enoughness about it. As opposed to, what if we took the insights we already have and integrated them more fully? What if we understood that we actually are the higher intelligence? Not to dismiss or discredit any external source of knowing or information, but again, more of a focus on the integration and the awareness of the wholeness and the fullness of who we are, that there is a higher intelligence in humanity embedded in our being. And also in the experience as we move through our days and as we begin to understand more fully who we are as human beings, that there is this experiential aspect to knowledge, information, understanding, education, that experiential aspect is far more important than perhaps we have given it credence in the past. Also, in terms of our approach to knowledge and information, there has often been this idea of dissemination, distribution of information that often comes down from above, or at the very least lateral sources. And what if we kind of looked at that differently and we considered this idea of, instead of dissemination, often one-to-one, often from a higher echelon down to the masses, what if it was more of an ingathering that we individually and then collectively within groups and organizations and systems and countries, or as one humanity, what if it's more of an ingathering, an organic flow that is coming into each of us individually as a dynamic and sustainable system? And then from there is this free flow of information that's much more two-way, and things are being not only communicated and disseminated, but also expanded upon as there is this natural exchange. And the information changes, right? Instead of being fixed, the information itself is changing because the field is changing, because we are changing, because there's always, a growth trajectory, at play. I hope that makes sense. Then also I wanted to mention, so the information age or the knowledge age that was very focused on consumption. Again, like the idea of getting information and consuming it. And what if we focused again more on integration, more on factoring in our own knowing and intuition, and then looked at the refinement of the information that we have at our fingertips now, thanks to the internet, thanks to artificial intelligence, thanks to just a growing awareness of that we are an intelligent system individually, and then that each system in and of itself has an intelligence. And so there's a refinement of the organic processes that are always unfolding, and new ways to filter and discern the information that is most appropriate, important, and informative to our individual processes. There's also been a heavy reliance on this idea of fact-checking or proving, or a need to fix or control or correct or judge or assess all those sorts of, or measure all those sorts of qualifiers in terms of information and knowledge. And what if we kind of started to look at that a little differently and release our attachment, not to diminish in any way the specificity, but rather just to take a step back and trust the process a bit more, trust life a bit more. Again, return to sort of the organic ways that, we can lean a little bit more into knowing and have a little bit less of a fixed attachment to specificity in terms of the exact precise knowledge that's going to be the answer, that's going to solve the puzzle or the problem or the answer the question or give us the some definitive course that is the unfailing direction or answer, and instead just maybe trust the process a bit more, be in it, in the experience of life, and seeing learning as a continual process, an unfolding opportunity to experience more and more of who we are, and to learn and gather in that information from all sources, as opposed to one specific source that is deemed most reliable by some external party or authority. So those are some thoughts on knowledge and information. I really just wanted to share those thoughts more so than provide any directive or any kind of specific practice. I think maybe it's just something to consider. This is another one of those worldview ones. I hope it's been helpful. So as I leave you today, I would just leave you with the invitation to consider knowledge, information, in terms of how does that work? How have you traditionally seen those, and how could you maybe loosen up and reconsider the sources that you trust, but also to return to begin within, to return to your soul's truth and radiance, but from that point to also consider, what is knowledge? What is knowing? What does it mean to access information? How can I choose to allow myself to be in formation with my relationship to information and knowledge? See you next time.